that you need to keep your business moving forward. Physical logistics. Do you know what their supply routes are? Have you spoken with the logistics providers to understand any potential impacts and how they propose to mitigate against them? What are your contingency plans if routes are canceled? As far as contracts are concerned, have you reviewed your contracts with key customers and suppliers to understand what your potential liability is in the event of supply shortages and how best to manage your legal risks? How will you respond if suppliers invoke different clauses that they may have in their contracts? Your inventory. Have you assessed your inventory cover? Do you need to ring fence inventory for particular customers in the case of shortages? And then do you have the ability to track shipments in real time and therefore manage your customers' expectations? We also want to think about customer loyalty and demand. How will you set expectations with customers? How can you recover the experience in the future, right? How well do you know your customers? Are you likely to lose customers to competitors or alternatives? And how will a drop in consumer demand impact your long-term growth plans? These are all questions we should be thinking about at this point if we haven't already. Other areas you want to focus on are, awareness and communications. Do you have a communication plan? Have you communicated with relevant customers, your employees, and suppliers about how you're managing your business during COVID-19? What about your workforce availability? How will you deal with the impact on your workforce? How can you ensure the safety of your employees while trying to maintain business as usual activities are going on? Have you assessed the cybersecurity and health safety risks associated with employees working from home? This is something that we haven't faced previously. Your technology, if a lot of small businesses don't have in-house IT support, you use third-party suppliers. Have they been impacted? Will this impact your system support? Does your workplace communications technology allow you to reduce travel and enable remote working? Just like what we're doing right now with Zoom, this is a great alternative to be able to continue to conduct business, have some face time, and not put others at risk. As far as commercial plans are concerned, how will your change plans and programs be impacted? Will project deadlines and investments need to be delayed? And what impact does this have on your long-term strategy? And then for those of you that may have boards, adhering to your governance, as far as meetings are concerned, can you do them differently than you have done them in the past? Do you have technology in place to support this? And as far as legal coverage, have you identified how to document the additional requirements to meet these new commitments? Cash flow, this is probably near and dear to all of our hearts. Have you reviewed and revised your cash flow, your working capital, your inventory forecast, along with supply and demand predictions? This is something that we need to be looking at potentially on a daily basis. And financial stability, how will your financial stability be impacted from further stock market declines and restricted funding? Will the completion of your financial statements be delayed? Are you in the middle of having audits? How will this impact you moving forward? For those of you that deal with global trade, are you aware of government mitigation plans which could impact your supply chain? And do you have domestic alternatives for suppliers? I'm sure there's only a small population of our membership that is in this area, but it's something that we need to think about and look at. Do you, as a business owner, have a dedicated resource reviewing public health requirements and other government related announcements to ensure that you're staying informed? We've been very, very fortunate as ABC members. Jean and Ed have been providing updates on a daily basis. This information is great. Take the time to review it and take that information and integrate that into what you're doing as a business owner. Have you assessed your obligations as an employer for the health and safety of your employees? Absolutely critical as we move forward. And then as far as business disruption is concerned, how are you going to maintain that trust with your customers and assure them that your product and services are still safe? How will a drop in demand impact your cost base and profitability? You may be needing to look at these models. Telework has really taken, a completely different spin than it has before. As we navigate the current environment and shift towards a remote way of working, we want to make sure that we're helping our employees to be safe and healthy, digitally prepared, and actively engaged. Maintaining a sense of team and managing the team experience is more critical now than ever before. I will cover some practices that help ensure continued security, productivity, and motivation during times of remote work. So it's really important that you use an agreed upon collaboration site to collect, the following information: your customer cell phone numbers and email addresses, if applicable and appropriate; your internal team calendar detailing, major projects, time off, holidays, or whatever other events that you have on your schedule. It's important to update email signatures to include cell phone numbers, and you may want to consider adding a photo to your signature. You want to actively communicate with your managers, your supervisors, teams of any changes that are going on within the business. As far as logistics and technology, you want to make sure everyone has access and understanding of what collaboration tools you want them to use, including if you're going to use instant messaging or these types of Zoom, or there's a variety of different ones. I'm not promoting any one, but make sure that you have an arrangement or an agreement of what your people should be using. Update any meeting invites that you have with remote collaboration tool. You want to test the technology before the meetings to ensure functionality. For those people that are at home, you want to have them check their at-home internet connection. Find an alternative in the case it's defective, whether it's a hotspot or approved public space with secure Wi-Fi. And if we're dealing with companies in different time zones, we want to make sure we're respectful of that. If you haven't already done so, you may need to order additional hardware to support remote work if necessary, and make sure it's approved by the appropriate people within your organization. Make sure that the appropriate IT support person is managing that process. And then you may want to start making modifications to any non-virtual training content, since most meetings and trainings are going to shift to a virtual mode for quite some time. What's important for people to do more so now than ever before is acknowledge emails when they're received. Indicate a tentative resolution time and follow up accordingly. You want to be extra proactive and clear and detailed in your emails, but it's important to recognize when an email will not be productive. If it's like complex or sensitive topics, then you want to have people pick up the phone and have a telephone conversation. That may be more appropriate. As far as phones, discussing with teams and customers whether calling or texting them on their cell phones is acceptable. And keep in mind, text conversations should never have sensitive or customer information. You want to be prompt in replying to customer calls and text messages. You want to update your voicemail message if you haven't already done so. And managing and controlling background noise is really important. Like we're doing today, we've asked everyone to put their computer on mute. Um, and then when you're dealing with your cell phones as much, I'm sure everyone is seeing it, we're going through our power pretty quickly. So we want to make sure we have an extra charger with us so that we can stay in contact. A lot of organizations are using instant messaging. When we're using that, we should sign in and be available on instant messaging and acknowledge when messages are received. If you're going to be in a meeting like you are right now, you would want to set your status according to your activity, right? A do not disturb when you're either presenting or in a meeting or when you're not going to be at your computer. As far as your customer interactions are concerned, you want to make sure that you're early to meetings. You want to load materials beforehand and then close it. You want to close any unwanted or sensitive views before sharing your screen. Oftentimes, sending a PDF of the documents in advance to everyone would be helpful in the event that the document doesn't load or someone can't see your screen during the meeting. You want to make sure that you're identifying the purpose of the meeting and speakers in the meeting. Make sure everyone understands what their role is and how they can contribute to the meeting objectives. I have found it's been really helpful when you're on with a group that you use a round robin to avoid talking over one another. You also want to make sure you do a roll call and identify the required participants to make sure that everyone that needs to be on there is. It's very helpful to maybe ask someone to take detailed notes with action items that can be distributed after the call. And make sure you have a buffer of anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes between meetings to avoid, an overlap and giving you a few moments to breathe and transition to your next topic. As far as having meetings with your internal team, excuse me, it's really important to have a discussion regarding the expectations that you have for people working remotely. Maintain a list of daily actionable tasks to ensure joint accountability. Review approval process and make sure that the team gets through it. They know what the expectations are and mitigate any potential risks. You want to leverage video conferencing if available so that you can see your colleagues, but first confirm if everyone is agreeable to that format. I don't know if you heard about the news guy who was on, and he was a cameraman as well as a news guy, and he was sitting in his boxers with a coat and tie and jacket on, or shirt on rather. You want to make sure that no one's going to be putting something up on the screen that could be risque, right, or embarrassing. We also want to make sure that we're empathetic. You may not know when your team members, what they're going through, how they're impacted by the current state of affairs. And lastly, on this effectiveness, you want to make sure that your employees plan their remote work like an office day, right? Choose a comfortable and convenient workspace at home or in a remote work location. If they do have video calls, dress appropriately, consider their surroundings, set up daily or more frequent checkpoints with each of your team members, set apart time for some non-work related catch up so that your teams and colleagues feel connected. Understand some of their work constraints. For example, if you're expecting some distraction during a call, let people know in advance, right? If you've got a dog that may be barking when the mailman passes by, or a baby who will be working up from a nap. Again, always send documents in PDF format before the call so that people can read them on the phone. When working remotely, employees risk losing their sense of connectivity and team, not to mention opportunities for humor and lighter conversations. By following these practices, it can help ensure what makes working at your company the most rewarding is retained. So now we're going to transition to something a little bit more bleak, if you will, but it's something I thought was important. And that is if an owner becomes incapacitated, we want to make sure that you're preparing your company for your incapacity or death. It's vital to the survival of the organization. Otherwise, your business will be disrupted, harming your customers, employees, vendors, and ultimately your family. For this reason, proactive financial planning, including your business and estate plan, is key. These are some tips on how to protect your company and keep the business on track and operating your day-to-day in your absence. So if you're a small business owner, your focus is likely on keeping the company running on a daily basis. While this is important, looking beyond today to what will happen if you can't run your business should be on the top of your to-do list. If you die or become incapacitated without a plan in place, you'll leave your heirs without clear instructions on how to run your company. This can jeopardize the business you've worked so hard to build. The right plan, along with adequate insurance, can help keep your business running regardless of what happens. You want to execute the proper business documents. If your company has several owners, a buy-sell agreement is a must. This contract will outline the agreed upon plan for the business should an owner become incapacitated or die. Provisions in the buy-sell agreement will include how the sale price for the business and an owner's interest are determined, whether the remaining owners will have the option to buy the incapacitated or deceased member's interests, and whether certain individuals can be blocked from participating in the business. Execute the proper estate planning documents. The next topic. A properly executed will or trust will allow you to state how you would like your assets to be transferred and who will receive these assets at your death. A will or a trust also lets you identify who will take charge of the assets and manage their distribution, including your business accounts, according to your wishes. Although a will can be used to pass assets at death, creating and properly funding a trust allows any assets owned by the trust to bypass the probate process, making distribution of assets to heirs much faster, private, and may reduce legal fees and estate taxes that your heirs would owe. Additionally, a trust can help your loved ones manage your trust assets if you become incapacitated. While you are alive and well, you typically act as the trustee of the trust, so you manage your business and assets with little change from the way you do it now. But unlike a will, a trust allows your successor trustee to step in and manage things if you become incapacitated. This process avoids court involvement, allows for smooth transition of your trust management, and proper continuing care for you in your time of need. Although having a will can be a great way to start, most business owners are much better off with a trust-based estate plan. Whether you own your business by yourself or a co-owner, it is important to have a separate term life insurance and disability policy that names your spouse and children as beneficiaries. The money from these policies will help avoid financial hardship while the buyout procedures of a buy-sell agreement are being carried out. Lastly, having a plan for your business in the event you are unable to continue managing the company is essential to keeping the company going. An attorney can explain the many options you have to protect the company so that you can focus on what you do best, running your company. And I'm sure we have several attorneys within our membership that can provide some insight and support into accomplishing this. So now we're going to transition over to the Families First Corona Response Act. I'm briefly going to go through these next several slides because we went into great detail during our last time together for those of you that were on it. FFCRA became effective on April 1st. It provides basically two major components, the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act and the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Act. And it's for organizations that are 500 employees are less. They're the only ones that are subject to it. It basically, the emergency paid sick leave will provide up to 80 hours of fully paid sick leave to all full-time employees, and it is prorated for any part-timers. And this is on top of any leave that they would have been available under your current company policies. And it's for anyone that was employed as of April 1st. Here are the reasons you can get it. If it's one of these three topics, someone is subject to quarantine or isolation, if they have been advised by a healthcare provider, or they're experiencing symptoms all related to COVID-19, they could be eligible for full pay up to 80 hours with a maximum of $511 per day or $51.10 over the entire paid sick leave. The other piece of the emergency paid sick leave are for those individuals that are either caring for an individual that is subject to the quarantine, or if they're caring for their child who is no longer in school, or their child care facility is closed, or if there are other similar circumstances related to COVID-19, these individuals would be eligible for up to 2/3 of their pay with a maximum of $200 per day or $2,000 over the entire 80 hours that they would be paid. Again, this is part of the new FFCRA, and what should be happening is if you have someone that falls within any of those 6 items that I shared, they should be given a request form to complete out. I have a sample of one that we've put together on the right side of your screen. Once they complete it and they send it back to you, you would then respond to them in writing with a response form. And you should keep both of these forms and any documentation that has been provided to you, you should retain for 4 years. You want to make sure that these forms and any of the medical information that has been provided or supporting documentation that you retain in a separate folder, locked up, and treat it as you would with any documentation you have for ADA or HIPAA. The other part of the FFCRA is the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Act, and that is where someone could receive up to 12 weeks of benefit for taking care of a child that is 18 or under. It would allow them to receive up to 12 weeks off of work. Their benefits would be continued, okay? And that would be reduced by any previously used FMLA that they would have taken in the previous 12 months. Those that are eligible for this are people that were hired prior to March 1st. During the first 10 days, the employer is not required to pay those individuals, but they can use the emergency paid sick leave for that, but it's up to the employee to determine, okay? The employee can also determine that they want to use any accrued unused sick or pay, vacation or PTO time that they have. If not, then the employer is eligible or required, I should say, to pay 2/3 of the employee's regular rate for the following 10 weeks, not to exceed $200 per day and $10,000 for the entire 10 weeks that they're off. Again, very similar to the emergency paid sick leave. You should have a form that would be completed by the employee, attach any supporting document. Once the employer receives it, they would then complete a response form, send that to the employee. You as the employer should retain both forms for 4 years, again, comply with ADA and HIPAA. Excuse me. Additional information on these benefits, okay? When they are on this, they continue as if they are an active employee, okay? So if it was someone that was new and they hadn't been eligible for benefits yet, once they become eligible, even though they're out, they would be have access to the benefits. Um, a lot of people have asked, believe it or not, can an employer pay more than the required 2/3? Yes, they can, but the company will only get the tax credit for the 2/3. The balance of it will, you'll take the hit for. Um, if someone is teleworking during non-business hours, they're not eligible for the expansion leave. Okay, so if they're teleworking either during business hours or non-business hours, then they wouldn't be eligible for it. If someone leaves the company, right, they're terminated and they have not used it all, will they continue to receive it or be paid out? The answer is no. This benefit is not retroactive prior to April 1st when it became effective. If someone was out prior to April 1st and due to a COVID-related situation, they will be eligible for benefits as of the April 1st date. A few more on this. If they don't use it all, is it carried over to next year? Answer is no. As far as intermittent leave, it depends on why and if the employer agrees. Keep in mind if someone wants to work, half days because their spouse is working half days and the other half they're each homeschooling or dealing with their children, that is a reason that you should support considering intermittent leave. If for some reason a business closes while someone is out on this leave, they decide they're no longer going to keep their doors open, the leave ends when the employer closes the door for good. Employees sent home and not getting paid to, they weren't working for you prior to April 1st, they're not eligible for it. And those employees that are furloughed on or after, once they are furloughed, they would no longer be eligible for it. My suggestion wouldn't be to furlough someone because the money that you're paying for this, you will get reimbursed back from the government, right? You're going to take that tax credit with each payroll that someone is on there for that. So speaking of payroll, I know I said this previously, you want to check with your payroll provider to make sure that they meet the new classifications and appropriate taxes. My recommendation was to set up 3 different payroll codes so that you can track the emergency paid sick leave at 100%, the emergency paid sick leave at 2/3%, and then the expanded FMLA or Emergency Family Medical Leave Act at 2/3%. Then you'll be able to know how much you have paid for those in order to take the tax credits here. So again, you have the ability to take 100% of what you pay out for your for the people that are out on the emergency paid sick leave and the emergency paid FMLA. 100% of that you can reduce your taxes by. You can also take the qualified health plan expenses for those individuals during that time and reduce your tax liability when you make the following tax deposit that you make. So we're going to switch over and bring you up to speed on some of the information that OSHA has provided us with, okay? As we know, OSHA is committed to protecting the health and safety of America's workers and workplaces during these unprecedented times. The agency has issued industry-specific alerts designed to keep our workers safe. When working in the construction industry, the following tips that you see on this screen can help reduce the risk of exposure to coronavirus. We want to make sure that we encourage employees to stay home if they're sick. allow workers to wear masks over their nose and mouth to prevent them from spreading the virus. And as we know, the governor, as of 8 a.m. yesterday morning, requires employers to provide masks, and that when people are out in public, they need to wear those. Continue to use other normal control measures, including other PPE necessary to protect your employees from other job hazards associated with construction activities. It is imperative that we advise our employees to avoid physical contact with others and direct employees, whether it's contractors, visitors. We want to increase personal space to it at a minimum of 6 feet where possible. We have work trailers. You want to make sure that they are maintaining social distancing while inside these trailers. And it's really important that we train our employees how to properly put on, use, wear, and take off any type of PPE. And then last but not least on this slide, encourage people to use either the inside of their sleeve or use a tissue or something when they cough or sneeze. It's important that we promote personal hygiene. If workers do not have immediate access to soap and water for hand washing, you need to provide alcohol-based hand rubs containing at least 60% alcohol. Delaware now requires employers to provide that to our employees. You want to make sure that you're using Environmental Protection Agency approved cleaning chemicals from List N or that have a label claims against the coronavirus. To the extent that tools or equipment must be shared, which we would love it to be a situation where no one has to share them, but if they must be shared, you need to provide and instruct your employees to use alcohol-based wipes to clean tools before and after use. When cleaning tools and equipment, you also want to make sure that we follow the manufacturer's recommendations for proper cleaning techniques and restrictions. We want to keep in-person meetings, which includes toolbox talks and safety meetings, as short as possible. Limit the number of workers in attendance and use social distancing practices. We want to clean and disinfect portable job site toilets regularly. Hand sanitizer dispensers should be filled regularly, and frequently touched items like the door pulls, the toilet seats, the areas inside it should be disinfected as often as possible. And then again, encourage employees to report any safety and healthy concerns that they may have. There are no specific OSHA standards covering COVID-19. However, some OSHA requirements may apply to preventing occupational exposure to COVID-19. In addition to the general duty clause, OSHA's PPE standards and bloodborne pathogen standards may apply to certain workplaces. It's really important that as an employer, you continue to monitor the development of COVID-19 and analyze whether employees could be at risk of exposure. It's also important for employers to consider what preventive measures they can take to maintain safety and protect their employees from potentially contracting this horrific virus. Also, OSHA requires that employers record certain work-related injuries and illnesses on their OSHA form, their OSHA log 300 log. And it has been determined that COVID-19 is a recordable illness when a worker is infected on the job. Establishments that are required to complete an OSHA 300 log should be sure to include any and all COVID-19 infections that are work-related. And I know that that is going to be very, very difficult for employers to determine. Hopefully when the tracing has been established, we'll have a better handle on it, but it's going to be very hard to pinpoint where someone contracted the virus. So I know these next 3 screens or slides, everyone has probably looked at a million times. As we all know, we have not entered into phase 1 yet. We're continuing to spike into southern Delaware, and it's basically 28 days from the time we were over the crest. We know that last week the governor closed schools for the balance of the year, is now mandating face covering when out in public, and that employers are required to provide these coverings, as well as what I said earlier, hand sanitizer for their employees. So I just wanted to include, what the governor has posted as far as our way of restarting Delaware's economy. So we're, again, 28 days at least before we hit phase one. Phase two, excuse me, is a little bit better, not a whole lot better, but it's going to be a while before we get back to any sense of normalcy. I think that we're all coming to terms with the fact that it's going to be a new normal. Excuse me. And then the third phase, I don't have a crystal ball, but I can't see phase three happening before the fall. I hope I'm wrong, but that's where we are. So let's talk about this reentry, preparing for reentry. What should we be doing as employers? Okay, we need to be pre-planning. We need to start making some purchases, which some of these are really, really difficult to find, right? We need to make sure that we have face coverings for all of our employees, hand sanitizer. You want to have thermometers, and I would recommend that you use no-touch thermometers, right, for your screenings. You want to make sure you have ample cleaning supplies. And again, Clorox wipes, I'm not promoting them. It's just one of the many brands, right? Have different disinfectant cleaners, and use towels that are one use, not multiple, or fabric towels. And if you don't already have no-touch trash receptacles, you want to bring those in. Prior to opening, you want to find and schedule a deep clean prior to the facility opening, and a number of our ABC members can help you with this. Recommendation is also scheduling more frequent facility cleanings than we've had in the past. As far as communication and training, one of the things that you definitely want to communicate is how to conduct assessments, right? The use of a thermometer and how to log data, and that you're going to be doing this. You want to communicate what prohibited activities you now have. What are some acceptable practices? You may want to consider that you're going to be scheduling common areas, right? Before, people used to just gather. Now it's got to be scheduled so that you can ensure that you've got social distancing going on. You may want to think about different signs, directions for conference rooms, and traveling in hallways, right? You may want to have hallways just one directional if you have the ability to have a loop in your building. So here are some general requirements or recommendations, guidelines, however you want to look at it. You may want to ensure that these are some of the things that you're sharing with your folks, that all employees and visitors are required to maintain a social distancing of 6 feet, and that you're no longer going to allow shaking of hands or other greetings that don't allow for the 6-foot social distancing. You want to make sure that you've got hand sanitizer stations and that they'll be in common areas, right? Break rooms, copy printer rooms, entrances, conference rooms. You want to talk about frequent cleaning of common and high-touch areas that should be performed with, cleaners that fight against COVID-19. And you may want to establish a frequency of how often these areas are going to be cleaned, like maybe twice per day, twice per shift, depending on the business. You also want to make sure that you've got posters that promote good hygiene practices. And you want to make sure that, you've got things in the appropriate places, right? Hand washing, you want to have those in the restrooms and in your break room or wherever you've got sinks. Signs up and around about covering your cough or your sneeze. Signs and symptoms of COVID-19, and then as far as posters regarding the different types of screenings that you may be doing either in-house or when they go to specific job sites. More on that, you would want to instill self-assessments and follow the guidelines, and that would be for all employees on a daily basis and any visitors. You may want to consider only having business critical visitors allowed to come to your office or your facility. Making sure that all employees and visitors are required to wear face coverings at all times, except for, of course, when they're eating or drinking, right? You could also look at this as they have it on at all times unless they are in, their own cubicle or private office and not interacting with anyone. Again, your passive screening and active screening, depending on where it would be, and it would be either your leadership team, your management team, your owners, or your safety professional would determine where those are going to be. Where possible, you want to maintain all non-essential internal doors to be kept in the open position. That would prevent people from having to touch them, right, in order to walk through. Of course, doors that are required for fire and security purposes, you won't be keeping those open. Excuse me. Cubicles, one of the things that you want to start doing, if you haven't already, is evaluate to determine if 6-foot distancing can be maintained by people sitting in their cubicles. Are they going to be 6 feet apart or not? If not, can you rearrange them? If you can't do that, you may want to either have people working different shifts, different starting and ending times so that you've got that space. Or if you don't have that capability, you may want to add shields so that if you have someone who has a standing workstation, you want to have a shield so that from the floor going up 7.5 feet would protect people from one another. And if it's a sitting one, you want to have an extension or a shield of some sort that would go to 5.5 foot high from that workstation. You also want to implement visual management, such as marking locations of chairs, preferred hallway travel paths, as a means to ensure 6-foot social distancing is being maintained. Your hallways that are beside sets of cubicles, you can go ahead and use those without putting up any special shields or barriers, but would discourage your employees and visitors from stopping to talk to someone, right? Just shooting the breeze and potentially spreading anything, right? Anyone that's walking through the hallways should have a mask on, okay, at all times when they're outside of their area. As far as your bathrooms are concerned, you want to take a look at those bathrooms and see the way that they're set up. If more than 2 people, 3 people, or even more than one person, can they maintain social distancing? And if not, then you may want to reduce the occupancy. You may want to change it to a single-use bathroom. During this time, have a sign on the outside that would be flipped saying, occupied, kind of like what they do on airplanes. You want to make sure that there's frequent cleaning with cleaners that are effective against this virus. You may want to consider putting cleaning supplies in each bathroom so that people, when they finish in there, they can clean up after themselves, such as stall doors, faucet area, sink area. And if you have a hand dryer, right now, you don't want anyone using that. That's just going to, if someone has the virus, it's going to spread it. You want to use disposable hand paper towels during this time. Your common areas, break room, printer stations, conference rooms. Again, you want to limit the number of occupants in break rooms and conference rooms. You want to post an updated maximum number allowed in order to maintain that social distancing of 6 feet. If for any of these you want to rearrange tables or take tables out, limit the number of chairs, again, to ensure that you've got the 6-foot social distancing. Some organizations don't want to do that. They're just going to put tape across chairs, right? You can use painter's tape. or just pull them out and stack them against the wall to make sure that you're not putting people in risk. You can put visual markers to make sure people know where the chairs need to be. And of course, no more than 10 people in a conference room, while maintaining social distancing. And it could be even less than that, depending on the size of the conference room, right, that you're meeting in. When you think about your break rooms, you may want to consider visual markings around microwaves, coffee machines, and refrigerators, again, to promote that social distancing, and ensure that there's hand sanitizer at these locations, and items for people, whether it's Clorox wipes or something like that, that they can wipe down the common shared areas and items. Where people typically congregate, you want to make sure that you've got visual markings in order to promote that, right? If you have a mail room or an area that people will be picking up their mail, you may want to re-look at this, right? You may want just the essential location, have someone send an email saying that they have mail and people can go get it and bring it back. Or you may want to have someone do it where they just drop it outside of a cubicle or outside of an office, and then someone can, pick it up and grab it when the other person has left. Again, with kitchens, lunchrooms, cafeterias, if you are a larger organization where you've got someone who are preparing meals, you've got cafeteria staff, these are some things to take into consideration. Again, the 6-foot social distancing is key. Some organizations that have plasticware and napkins and whatever, you may want to have someone put gloves on and just roll knives and forks in napkins, so that you don't have people reaching into a bin or into a box to grab these things. If you have a community, condiment area, you may want to switch over to individually packaged condiments so that you don't have that. You also want to consider staggered or extended hours. So you may want to have, if you have a small kitchen, you may want to have one department, they're allowed to go in and prepare their lunch, at 11:30. The next department at 11:45. So you don't have a cluster of people in there. And also have a notice as to how many people can be in there. You may want to add an additional refrigerator at the other end of your building, or a microwave, to make sure that you've got multiple places where people can put a meal together. For those businesses that do have elevators, this is something that most of us don't think about. You want to make sure that the elevator, you can maintain a social distance of 6 feet, which is kind of hard. So you want to post a sign with an updated number of the recommended occupants in order to maintain that. You may want to consider using the elevator for only going up, and mandating stairs be used when you want people to come downstairs, right, to descend. And again, placing visual markers where the individual should stand in the elevator in order to maintain that social distancing 6 feet. What are some of the other things that we probably haven't thought of? And those are policies. And I know no one likes to hear HR talk about policies, right? But it's really important to establish what the rules are, the expectations are, before people do come back. So you want to have, a COVID-19 return to work policy based on CDC's guidelines, right? When can someone go back? You don't want someone coming back from having the virus and the rest of your place to be, a wreck over worrying about it. What are the steps, the processes, and what documentation, if any, are you requiring? Some guidelines or a policy. What happens if you have someone who refuses to return to work because they're afraid of contracting the virus? And it's important that as an employer, you weigh out the employee's legal rights and their understandable health concerns, along with the organization's business needs, right? It can be a tough balancing act at times, but you need to keep in mind OSH and ADA when responding to the employee who won't return to work. As far as telework is concerned, making sure you have a policy that defines the eligibility, requirements, expectations, employee suitability, job responsibility, equipment needs, flexible work arrangement is not guaranteed. Also recognize that the public sentiment around remote work is going to change drastically when we eventually return to normal. If your organization does not recognize this, you're going to put yourselves at a distinct disadvantage when it comes to recruiting and retaining talent. Office standards. How will the office operate to comply with the new CDC guidelines? Self-assessment. Who, when, and where will this be done? Excuse me. Meeting standards, depending on the size of the company, how many conference rooms, and how business is conducted while still meeting the CDC's guidelines. And then, your prohibited activities. You may want to modify your current work rules or general rules of conduct to include what isn't allowed. Your rehire process. If you've laid off or furloughed employees, how, when, and in what order will you be rehiring? And then as far as travel is concerned, are there going to be any business and or personal travel restrictions that you want to include in your organization's policies? So we've had a lot of questions regarding unemployment, right? Unemployment has, they've done an amazing job. For the most part in Delaware, I know that it's been overwhelming. They normally turn around between $1 and $1.3 million from the state of Delaware's unemployment. And last week, I think it was over 30 million. So they're turning a lot of money around to support our economy and our unemployed. And actually some of them are making out quite well, those that are getting the benefits, right? Because they can receive up to $400 based on what their compensation was before going out. And under the CARES Act, they're now getting an additional $600, okay? So some individuals are getting up to $1,000 a week, which is oftentimes a lot more than what they were receiving when they were working for us, right? So that will continue continue to happen through the end of July. But one of the things that a lot of organizations are asking is, how is this impacting us as an employer? So based on the latest information, the first week that someone is out will not affect your rates, okay? That is being picked up by the feds, if you will. And the $600, which is part of the CARES Act, will not affect your rates either. The rates are calculated on an annual base each October for Delaware employers. At this point, there's no determination if the current unemployment calculations will be changed due to the pandemic. Some of our employers are looking for talent to fill some current roles because, a lot of people being out taking care of children and the like, so they're looking for talent. You really can use the job link, and I have the link up on the screen. This is a great resource, free resource, where you can actually post your jobs and it automatically matches up with those people that are currently looking for work around our area that match the skill set that you're looking for. So please take advantage of that. If you have questions regarding employees that are applying for benefits, so let's say you have worked for someone, but they've chosen that they don't want to work, and they'd rather just apply for unemployment, you can reach out to the unemployment office and let them know that there is work, it is safe, and that they've chosen not to, that may help people make a different decision about applying for unemployment, or it may make them ineligible for it. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was make sure that we understand that even though we're in the middle of this pandemic, HIPAA compliance is still here to stay, okay? So we want to make sure that everyone understands that the privacy rules still apply even though we're in the middle of a pandemic. And really what can be shared with people is, basically if someone has a positive, right, test for COVID, who can be told, right? So that information will and should be shared with the public health authority. Information can be shared at the direction of a public health authority. And then if there are any people that are at risk of contracting or spreading the disease, they then can be told. But otherwise, we're not sharing any information specifically about an individual. Again, we're fortunate that we're moving quickly, I believe, for the tracing process and system to be in place, and I think that will help significantly. Another compliance that we need to keep in mind is ADA, right? So some of the questions that have come up are, can employers take an employee's temperature? And the answer is absolutely yes. A month ago, that answer was no, but as a result of some changes under OSHA, it is now allowed and encouraged. Can employers require employees with symptoms to stay at home or leave the workplace? You absolutely can. You want to make sure that you do everything that you can to ensure that the rest of your workforce is kept healthy and safe, right? Can you screen job applicants for symptoms of COVID-19? You can, but only after making a conditional job offer, all right? And then if you have someone that is, you've made an offer to, can you delay their start date or rescind an offer? If the individual has COVID-19, yes, you can. When employees return to work, can you require a doctor's note certifying fitness for duty? Yes, you can. Now, keep in mind, doctors are overwhelmed right now. It may take a little while in order to get it. I would encourage anyone that has had a positive test result that you're in contact with, you let them know that you would need something for them to return to work from their healthcare provider. Doing that up front instead of when it's the day before they're ready to come back. Can you administer a COVID-19 test? The answer is yes. Now, I would not recommend, I would not want to be doing that, but you can go through that process. Can employers store or log medical information pertaining to COVID-19? Yes. Again, as I said earlier in the presentation, it must be kept separately from the employee's personnel file and limiting access to this confidential information. Not anyone or everyone should have any access to that. So let's talk for a few moments on best practices, right? It's really important, as with any journey, that the business challenge can be taking that very first step, right? Organizations, your businesses can take these actions to help you get started in moving forward to the next step. You need to find or develop a model to visualize the current impact and trajectory of this at all of your sites, offices, and job locations. You want to consider sending a survey to the employees to rate how well, whether it's your help desk or self-service, your frequently asked questions, your technology, or enabling them to remote work or telework. You want to make sure that the employee is set on their top priorities, right? Which should be shifted to what's critical to the business, not what the employee thinks is important, but what you as the employer, the manager, the supervisor feel that they should be working on that's going to significantly impact the success of the organization. Empower your employees' support networks with data, best practices to identify and address burnout, isolation, confusion, and stress. You want to check the tone and length of your communications, maintain an empathetic and human touch, and invite everyone to collaborate. You want to promote virtual trainings, mentorship, group learning that can help address the current skills shortages that you have or that you've had prior to this happening. You want to ensure continuity of key resources and decision makers with backup contacts who are in regular correspondence, and then provide extra support to key resources who have been identified as top retention priorities. Teleworking must be maximized, especially for individuals at highest risk of poor outcomes, such as those over 60 and those with chronic underlying conditions. You want to make sure that you're following all state and CDC guidelines and recommendations for social distancing for not only your staff, but customers. And keep in mind, social distancing, if you haven't heard me say it enough, is 6 feet or more. We know things will be different. Every business will have a social distancing, and it might mean we can't operate at full capacity as we continue to move forward. Keep in mind, change is constant and can produce some opportunities, some, different things than you've ever thought of before. You want to use this time to innovate for your business. What you were offering yesterday may be different tomorrow as a result of this. As I shared previously, having ongoing online training, having development books, self-help books, professional development is really important for people right now. You may want to have them working on standard operating procedures, updating job descriptions, physical requirements for their position. Some of those projects you've had in the past, you may want to bring from the back burner and have people work on it while they have some downtime. But it's really important that you communicate with your team frequently, keep them informed, and keep them engaged. Now, the next 3 slides, I'm going to quickly go through so you see them. We can provide them for you if you're interested. One of the things that we want to keep in mind, we have a lot of young people right now who are doing everything online that maybe before they hadn't. And it's important for each of us as parents, grandparents, guardians, friends, that we have some conversations about online safety and make sure we get involved with them. So here are some components on this slide. The next talks about setting some ground rules. Again, we can send these out separate for anyone that's interested. You don't have to be a cyber pro in order to make sure that your children or any children in your life are safe online, but it's important that we take a look at that. We put controls in place, you log and monitor, and there's additional information and resources where you can reach out to get additional help on this. One other thing that's a little fun is here are some adventures from home, right? So we can also send you this slide, which gives you some different webcams around the country, different parks, beaches, including Delaware beaches are on here as well, but different things that may be able to keep some young people engaged and interested. Maybe a way to plan for future vacations once all of this is behind us. So you can let us know if anyone is interested in any of those slides. This pandemic, first and foremost, is a decidedly human tragedy. The fear and uncertainty that colleagues, clients, families, friends are dealing with is very, very real to everyone. What we do now and how we treat our employees will significantly impact their lives. It will define how employees feel about your company forever. So just a free ad, HR strategies. These are some of the things that we provide. If anyone needs any support around this, they can certainly reach out to us and we'd be happy to help them. Any questions?
I don't see any in the chat room, Tricia, at this point. I do see a question about the providing these slides, and just so everybody knows, this has been recorded by ABC, so you will get a copy of that recording. But please keep in mind this information changes on a daily and minute basis. But so that's the only question that I've received or I see in the chat room right now. So if anybody else has a question, if you want to unmute and ask that question of Trish, you certainly can do so. Does anybody have any questions? If you want.
No, but thank you for your time today. It was very informative.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. If someone has a question or if it's something that's a little bit more, company specific, my contact information is up on the screen. Feel free to reach out. And if there's nothing else, I'll say thank you for your time, your attention. And I just hope everyone stays safe and healthy.
And just so everybody knows,
You too.
before you sign off, the next one will be next Wednesday. It'll deal with insurance, buildings, things like that. So if you want to check in next Wednesday at 11:30, Gene will be sending out a note for next Wednesday's seminar as well. So with that, stay safe, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you next Wednesday as well. Tricia, thank you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.